Thank you all for being here at this first meeting of the committee recently appointed by Lieutenant Governor Jones for the purpose of prudently eliminating the personal income tax here in Georgia. Just want to thank all of you who've come, first of all, the senators who've come to be a part of this discussion. While the mechanics are up for debate, I think it's been very clear that the end goal is not. Also, thank you to those who are here in the audience who will provide feedback. We do want to leave time at the end. We sort of have a hard stop at noon, but we think we've built into that to allow for time for feedback from the audience and the people who are just everyday Georgians who think that they may benefit under this new rule or think they may not. We want to hear from them as well. So with that being said, Lieutenant Governor Jones, thank you, first of all, for appointing this committee. Thank you for appointing me to chair it. And the floor is yours to kick off these first comments on eliminating Georgia's personal income tax.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senators, for being here today. I appreciate y'all taking time out of your busy schedules to come and participate in this very important study committee. I'd like to thank the chairman for all his hard work and putting together a itinerary and a format of everything, but I will tell you that the people who are on this committee, there's a good reason for each and every one of you being on here, because you're some of our most senior members here in the legislature, as well as some that I put a lot of trust in, both on the Republican and Democratic side. So for each and every one of you, I appreciate your time and effort with this. I will be very brief. Something that we have talked about for years as a state legislature. In my time in the state senate, we've always talked about reducing the burden, the tax burden on hardworking Georgians. We've also talked about reducing the state income tax. In a lot of cases, most of us or some of us in this room have run on eliminating the state income tax. That's something that I've always talked about in my time as lieutenant governor, and I'm very proud of the fact in the 3 years that I've been lieutenant governor, we have lowered the state income tax all 3 years. In fact, in the last 3 years, with the leadership of Governor Kemp and the legislative body, we've given back over $6 billion to taxpaying citizens here, whether it's in the form of rebates or suspension of gas tax or whatever it might be. That is a significant number, $6 billion. The purpose of this committee is to look for the best way from a fiscal responsibility, as well as from just good governance. Look for the best way to get us to complete, like our neighbors in Tennessee and Florida, having a zero income tax. I will tell you that right now, the state of Georgia has the second highest state income tax. Only South Carolina it has a higher state income tax than we do right now, and they are moving towards lowering theirs. So if we want to continue to stay competitive here in the state of Georgia and continue to be the #1 state to do business, we've got to be looking for ways to keep us competitive and make it where we have a competitive advantage over states that we are competing with all the time. Florida, Tennessee, Texas, North Carolina, all these states, and when it comes to job opportunities or industry opportunities, we are competing against those states. And we want to be able to illustrate that we have a good tax code, a welcoming tax code, and also because we know we're a great place to live, work, and play, and we want to make sure we're stay a very affordable place for people to stay. So, Senator, if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. But like I said before, this committee is set up to be to create a blueprint for us to follow as a legislative body to get to our ultimate goal. And like I said, we want to be responsible in how we do it as well. So, Senator, unless you have any questions, I will leave you with all the festivities of today. I've got to get to LaGrange, Georgia right after this. So, but I appreciate each and every one of y'all for serving on this committee.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. We do understand the goal. You do have a comment from the pro tem.
Good morning, Governor. Good to see you this morning.
Good to be here.
I wanted to thank you for appointing me to this important committee. I want to thank you for your bold leadership as Lieutenant Governor, and the progress we've made under your leadership has been fantastic. And as you already alluded to, the steps we made in lowering the state income tax would not have happened without your leadership, and I appreciate that. Governor, you've got a belief. I've served with you now for 10 years, and you believe in limited, efficient, and effective government. And I think this committee is proof of your efforts to continue that. And you've got I think, a common man's touch and have the pulse of what's going on with our citizens and the struggles they have to balance their household budget and to pay for gas and groceries and cost of living and housing and all that. And so I appreciate your leadership with this and look forward to what will come out of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate
Mr. Pro
that.
Tem, any other senators have any comments or questions? Governor, thank you for being here. Thank you for appointing this committee. And if it's okay with you, we're going to go ahead and jump straight into getting to work.
Sounds good. All right. Appreciate each and every one of y'all for your hard work and look forward to hearing your feedback. So thank y'all very much.
Thank you. You can clap. I saw some of y'all start. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Jones. As many of you already know, I'm Blake Tillery. I have the privilege of chairing this committee. And I think you've heard from the Lieutenant Governor that our mandate, that our mission is clear. It's the elimination of the personal income tax here in Georgia. That brings in roughly $16.2 billion. We know that the goal ahead of us, we know what the goal is. The mechanics on how we get there are really the impetus and the purpose for this committee. So we have an agenda before us that will start out. It's going to change slightly. One of our presenters had a personal emergency this morning and is not going to be able to attend, Mr. Gleason. But Mr. Norquist is going to be more than adequately capable of handling his comments and bringing us up to speed on what we're seeing across the nation. You will, if Mr. Gleason were here, he would have told you that 9 states have already eliminated their personal income tax or never charged it to begin with. Pro Tem the majority leader makes sure that I also make that comment. So this is not an unachievable goal. Other states have gotten there, and they also provide us with a model for how to do so. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have 9 states worth of ideas, as well as ideas that we can have that are Georgia grown, for how we can put a 5% raise in the pocket of every hardworking Georgian. So with no further ado, we'll jump into our first speaker, and that is Mr. Grover Norquist. Grover is the president of Americans for Tax Reform, a taxpayer advocacy group that he organized in 1985 at the request of President Reagan. Many of you know about Americans for Tax Reform already. They work to limit the size and scope and cost of government and oppose higher taxes at the federal, the state, and the local level. Grover also chairs the Wednesday meeting in Washington, D.C., a weekly gathering of more than 150 elected officials and conservative movement leaders. There are similar coalitions. There's actually one here in Georgia. They meet in 42 different states and over 20 countries. Grover also, when he's not working on tax reform, serves on the board of the Parental Rights Organization, the Goldwater Institute, the Job Creators Network, and the Center for National Interest. That keeps you very busy, Mr. Norquist, and we're very proud that you would come and join us here today on what you already know about is a laudable goal, a notable goal, and one that we think you can help point us in the direction by showing us what other states have already done. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Delighted to be here, and thank you very much for this this opportunity. We started working at Americans for Tax Reform. We started working with the states when North Carolina, the head of the Ways and Means Committee, expressed an interest in phasing their income tax down towards zero. There were then 8 states that had no income tax, and the question was, okay, some states never had an income tax, but can you go from here to there? Can you go from having an income tax down to getting to not having one? And North Carolina looked at it and started 12 years ago. The way they approached it was to say revenue's been coming in at one level. We're going to set a spending level, and when revenue comes in above that spending, a certain percentage of the revenue will go into additional government spending by the state, but some of it will then go to permanently reduce the income tax. So it triggers a reduction, a permanent reduction in the income tax rate when ongoing revenue comes up above what the state was planning to spend. And so for 12 years now, they have been triggering down their tax rate. They've had a revenue rate reduction each time. They have actually raised revenue each year. More revenue has come in each year than before. And they've had strong economic growth and, of course, done very well with revenue coming into the state and jobs and opportunity coming in. The reason why North Carolina and now 12 other states are looking seriously at moving to a zero income tax state, personal income tax state, is that they've looked at the 50 states and noticed the various studies. The government keeps track of the movement of people through the census from one state to another, but also the income of those people. So you know the amount of annual income that moves from California to Florida, from New York to Texas, between states. And not only people move from high tax states to zero income tax states, but a lot of income moves, annual income earned by people moves into states with zero income tax rates. First, investment moves into those states, jobs moves into those states, and then people move into those states. The children of people who live in Massachusetts move out before their parents do, looking for jobs and opportunities. And so more states are beginning to look at how can we get to zero income tax. The first fallacy people generally have is that if you don't have an income tax, you will end up having to move the money to somewhere else. What we found from those states that have been phasing down their income tax, everybody should have the map here of those states that are in process of doing it. This map divides the states into the green states, which have no personal income tax, and the yellow states, which have a single rate tax. And orange states have passed a law to move to a single rate tax, but they don't have yet a single rate tax. They're phasing it down, again, with triggers in each case. And the ones with the green lines in them are states that have passed laws that will trigger automatically their state to a zero income tax. Mississippi voted to go to a flat rate tax a number of years ago and is now voted to go to a zero income tax rate as revenue came in. They're at a 4% flat rate tax. Took them a few years to get to a 4% flat rate tax. They triggered down to that, and now they're triggering to zero. Kentucky is moving to, has gone to a 3.5% flat rate tax and is now triggering to zero. West Virginia has not yet gone to a flat rate tax. They are en route to a flat rate tax, and then from there to zero. Indiana's en route to zero as well. And as you look at, so those are where the states are now. Just right now, Iowa moved from a 8.6% top rate. In 5 years, they moved down to a flat rate of 3.8%. All the time increasing revenue into the state while they took the rate down because people worked harder, more people moved into the state, more jobs were there, and they ended up at a single rate of 3.8%, and they're now moving to go towards zero on that one. South Carolina, next door, had a challenge, and some people who never wanted to reduce spending or taxes at all in the state. In South Carolina, who have now moved on. They're at 6%. They only had their first income tax cut in the history of the state a couple years ago. They had never reduced the income tax at all. Now they're at a top rate of 6%, and their House has voted to go to 1.99% using triggers as North Carolina did. And then the House Senate will do that either at the beginning of next year. They're agreed on the legislation, and the governor has supported it as well. So South Carolina in January February of next year, we'll have passed the law which will trigger it down to zero, down to 1.99, and then they'll have to pass another law to go to zero. Our friends in Louisiana moved to a 3% tax, flat rate tax, and they need to make one change to allow, they've got a lot of their taxes that are siloed. They're eliminating the silos so that you don't get money locked up in one thing rather than another, so that they can then trigger, with the income tax, trigger that down to zero and have revenue that's available for all schools and everything else, not locked into one particular source. They will then move to go down towards zero as well. The governor and the legislature are both committed on that. And the ones with the black dots is where you guys are a black dot, because I have your Senate leadership is in support of this effort. But you'll see Senate, in the case of South Carolina, the governor, the Senate, and the House, G, S, and H, have all committed to go to zero. And in North Carolina, the Senate's also committed to zero. The House has as well. I'm not quite sure why I don't have H there. Governor's a Democrat, but gets overridden on these issues. So North Carolina is en route to zero. As we look at some of the questions people have is, well, what do you do for revenue? These are states, Arizona went down to 2.5% from a rate that was as high as 8%. Revenue continues to go up. People move into states. It's one of the first things when a state says, governor or state legislature say, we're going to zero, and they pass laws to go to flat rate tax and then on to zero, they signal to the investment world, to businesses that are looking to where to put factories. Once you've decided to put a factory in the United States, and President Trump has put in a lot of incentives for people to invest in the United States, there's still 50 choices. What state are you going to be in? You're going to be, okay, you're going to be in America, that's fine. And which one? There are 50 states. And then you decide where to go. Being en route to zero is almost as good as, credibly, is almost as good as already being in zero. And the reason is people build a factory for the next 50 years, not for the next 5 years or 5 months. So if they know that once they know that you're credibly moving down towards zero and going to zero, people can start to invest based on that decision. And that's why something like triggers, where you make the case, here is how we're getting to zero, this is why we're going there, and the mechanism we're doing it. As people have watched North Carolina over 12 years trigger down, they've recognized, and Iowa followed North Carolina. They moved much more rapidly than North Carolina did, because they saw North Carolina go very cautiously, very carefully, I think wisely, very cautiously and carefully, first people to do it. But other states looked and said, actually, you could move faster than that. They had a rainy day fund in Iowa, which was set aside specifically for tax cuts. And so they felt comfortable. They didn't have to use it, but they felt comfortable moving down. On questions of, well, but can you fund schools and roads and things like that if you don't have an income tax? Well, there you look at the 8 states that don't have an income tax. Florida doesn't have an income tax. New York does. New York's income tax is over 10%. There are now more Americans living in Florida than New York. More Americans live in Florida than New York. When I was a kid, Florida was cattle country, not people country. It's now more people in Florida than New York. And New York, this last year's number is $230 billion state spending. Florida, 115. Florida spends half as much as New York. Florida has schools that are every bit as good as New York's. They have roads that are every bit as good as New York. Make a list of what you want your state to do. Everything's as good in Florida or better than New York. New York has more government workers. They are paid more. They work fewer hours in a week. They work fewer weeks in a year. They work fewer years in their careers. They get pensions like nobody in the rest of the country sees. And that's what you get different between New York spending and Florida spending, but in terms of services, Florida does just as well as New York. They spend half as much. So there's $115 billion they don't take from the people of Florida. And as a result, people move there, and billions of dollars in income and people making that income move into New York on a regular basis, which increases the number of people who go to New York, and I guess the number of people who pay sales taxes as well. But again, they're not making it up in volume. They're spending less money over time, but spending it more wisely. Ditto with Texas and the other states that do not have an income tax. Tennessee and New Hampshire used to be states with income taxes. They had income taxes on dividends and interest, on savings, but they didn't tax wages. Over the last 10 years, both of them, they had a 6% tax in Tennessee and a 5% tax in New Hampshire on dividends and interest. Both of them phased them to zeros. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 in Tennessee over a 6-year period, and they took less than 3 years to get rid of the 5% tax in New Hampshire, and so that phased down completely. I would strongly recommend what other states are doing is first you get to as you go down, get to a single rate tax. Each of the states on its way to zero. Arkansas is not a single rate tax, but they intend to go there in the next year or two. They've been dramatically cutting their taxes, and the governor has committed to going to zero in Arkansas. They're en route to zero, but they've sort of been cutting here, there, there. They're going to get to a single rate tax. It becomes much easier once you're at a single rate tax to explain to people what you're doing. The politicians who play to envy like to argue, well, they had 9 rates in North Dakota. They got down to 2 rates. On the way down to 2, there are all these fights about Mary's getting a bigger cut than, we're all going to zero, guys. No, but this year Mary's getting a bigger cut than me in percentages or in dollars. We're all going to zero. Now that we're at 2, they're going to 1, and then they're going to 0. And the fighting, the back and forth is over. But even though everybody knew they were going to 0, it was fascinating to see the envy play out between people who felt that the person next to them was somehow getting their tax cut faster, firster than the other. Get to a single rate tax and you take envy off the table, and the politicians who play to envy don't have anything to talk about during the rest of the conversation. So a single rate becomes very difficult to raise. In Illinois, which is a very big government state, they have 2/3 committed to bigger government, 2/3 Democrat majority, and a governor who speaks very highly of big government. Their tax is under 5%, 4.95%, because they have a constitutional amendment that requires a single rate tax. And when they go into huddle and say, what if we were to raise the income tax to spend for all these wonderful services that we talk about, they go, are you kidding? We'd lose the election. So they don't think they can take their income tax up because they have to raise everybody's taxes at once. So from the heart of big government territory, they recognize that once you treat people the same, you can't raise their taxes easily. You've got to divide them into different groups, then you can mug them one at a time. The governor tried to do that. He put on the ballot in Illinois, let's go to a graduated or progressive income tax. Page 1 of Karl Marx's short memo, to go to a graduated income tax, and that was defeated by 9 points. The same day that Biden beat Trump statewide by 16 points. But the idea of a graduate income tax lost when the people were voting for Biden, but they said, let's not go to a graduate tax. You'll mug us once at a time. So getting to a single rate tax is a very important project line, which Georgia has done. And so that takes the envy thing off the table and is very, very helpful in making discussions about how high taxes should be. You are in a neighborhood where South Carolina, within the year, will be committed to 0. North Carolina is now debating whether they're going to 2.45, which is the present plan, or down to 1.99, which some people want to go to because South Carolina is going to 1.99. There's an argument between the House and the Senate on that. Alabama's staying still at 5%. There may be some discussion on taking that further down, but I haven't seen that credibly show up yet. Mississippi is en route to 0. Louisiana at 3 should be going to 0, and should commit to 0 in the next year and a half. Arkansas also going to 0. Missouri, the governor was elected on a commitment to going to 0. He and the House and the Senate are meeting over this year on how to get to 0 and what the approach will be there. Nearby Tennessee's already at 0. Kentucky, West Virginia going to 0. Virginia was within one vote in one body of going to 0, but didn't make it in the last election cycle. So all of these are moving in the direction of going to 0. And the challenge, my strong suggestion is, once you've committed to go to 0, you begin the benefits of getting to 0. Because if you do it credibly and the world goes, yes, this is happening, people investing know this is coming and can start to say, we're going to start putting things, we're going to start building things, more things in the state, because we trust that it's going to happen. And again, we're investing for 50 years, not just for the next few. We don't need to know that you're doing it next week. We do need to know that it's happening, which is why the triggers have worked well, and people have been moving into North Carolina, because the triggers to 0, which are still going to take them a while to get to 0, have convinced them that North Carolina will soon be at 0. That said, I think that's whatever questions or thoughts you have. This is something that's moving throughout the nation, and I don't know of one that's going of a state that's going in the wrong direction.
Thank you, Mr. Norquist. Thank you for your comments and kind of just leading us through a case study, for lack of a better term, of what other states are already doing. If I've got your notes correctly, you said 8 states. I thought it was 9 were already at 0. You're saying it's 8.
There's a debate over Washington State.
Gotcha.
In Washington State, the Supreme Court in Washington State, which is run by Bolsheviks, announced that a capital gains tax is not a tax on income, because the capital gains tax is an excise tax.
So that's why you have 9 states. It's a
Now,
legal.
it's 9 if you believe
If you
that
count
a
Washington.
capital gains tax is an excise tax. It
Gotcha.
is 8 if you think it's an income tax.
And then
But they do have a flat rate constitutional requirement.
Got it. And after those 8 or 9,
Yes.
I've circled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 other states that surround us or one state away from us that you say are on their way to 0 now already?
Well, they've committed. North Carolina's en route. South Carolina has passed it in one House Hill and is going to the other. Florida's there. Mississippi's passed the law to trigger. If they just do nothing but this, it triggers down to 0. Tennessee's at 0. Kentucky triggers to 0. West Virginia triggers to 0. Louisiana's already gone to 3 flat and is committed to triggering to 0. But they've got to make a change in their constitution, which they will do.
Gotcha.
And Texas is at 0. And Arkansas is committed to 0.
So just by your map, it would appear then that Georgia and Alabama are the outliers, clearly south of the Ohio River and east of the Mississippi.
Yes, that's true.
I know we're here to talk about Georgia. Is there a reason why Alabama has not taken this in? I want to be fair with all of our questions and give each side their thought. I've heard some things about siloed income, but I don't know if that's what it is or.
They do silo many of their taxes. They're siloed. So the idea of trying to reallocate resources becomes very difficult for them. They also have some very powerful spending lobbies in the state, and they have not had They have too many George Wallace Republicans.
Understood. I want to make sure, I've got several other questions, but I want to make sure if anybody else has some questions, Mr. Leader.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having this today, and look forward to several deep dives in this conversation. Mr. Norquist, as you're talking about Alabama, can you give examples of maybe what some of these silo taxes are that the people of Alabama are facing, as a barrier of why they can't get to zero?
I've just heard that as the argument from,
Okay.
from people there. I know that a bunch of stuff is silent, I mean, more than other states. I'm not an expert on it. Just when you start to talk to people in Alabama, they give you that as one of their reasons.
Okay, I'm just curious. My Senate district borders Alabama, so I'm just curious as to.
I'll get an answer to that, because it's one of the reasons that you get, but it's also been their choice of governors.
Correct. That's fair. Thank you, sir.
That's gotten in the way. They've had tax increase in governors. I didn't think we had any of those.
That's why we recruit business from Alabama to
Yes,
West Georgia.
and you will continue to do so for some time.
That's our goal.
Any other questions from, any other senators have any questions for? I guess I turned my mic back on, sorry. Chairman Hofstadler, do you have a question?
Thank you for being here, and I do want to point out, we're not moving probably as fast as I would like to, but since 2017 forward, we had not had any income tax cuts in the history of Georgia. These guys here over the last few years have moved it down, maybe not as fast as I would like, but in that direction. And I think we'll continue to do that. But as far as, one of the things is cutting taxes, but you've also got to control the spending. What have you seen on the spending side? I guess my opinion would be is if you don't have an income tax, you don't need any income tax credits. But what have you seen on that side for them to be fiscally responsible?
Yeah, what it has done in each state is it allows people to focus more on spending restraint and ways to take a look at how to rein in spending, because taxpayers see benefits. What's the benefit to spending restraint if there's lower taxes, right? I mean, I'm not going to have this, but what? Well, we're phasing the income tax to zero is a pretty good argument for why one can make, but there are a lot of decisions where spending goes for specific special interests, and reducing the income tax is two things. It's everybody who pays the income tax, and it's everybody who's hurt by the fact that the income tax exists. Even somebody who's not paying the income tax themselves is damaged when businesses move out of the state because the income tax is lower somewhere else, or it doesn't move into the state because the income tax is somewhere else. And I would suggest that you take a look at the corporate income tax at the same time that you're looking at the personal income tax. In North Carolina and in Iowa, as two of the states that were early movers on moving to zero, North Carolina for several years had been phasing their income tax down, and then they looked over and they said, what's this thing over here? And they said, that's the corporate income tax. They said, well, the businesses are all complaining about it, and it's not very big. And so they've begun a 4 or 5 year phase out to zero. So theirs is gone, I think, in 2 years now, their corporate income tax.
Right.
That is a big attractor for for investment as well. Our friends in Iowa moved their corporate income tax from 12% to 7%. At the same time, they're taking their individual rate from 8.6 to 3.8. And so the corporate income tax also scares away businesses, and it generally doesn't bring in anywhere near as much revenue. But take a look at your specific example, the case in Georgia.
Senators, let me tell you that if you don't mind, if you just give me a finger up. Right now, when you're mashing your button, it's not showing up on my screen, so I'm having to look down to figure out which one you are. So I don't know who was next. I saw the pro tem, so I will turn to him first, and then Senator Warwick, if you had a question, I'll certainly go to you next. Go ahead.
Mr. Norquist.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, and your answer to Chairman Huffstetler's question raised a question for me. So now, and I see it now on your chart, but this chart is for state individual income tax,
Yes.
not overall corporate. I mean, it doesn't include the corporate income tax.
Just personal.
And in Georgia, we also lowered the corporate income tax in sync with lowering the individual income tax. I would have to defer to Chairman Huffstetler, but I don't think we initially did that. But this last lowering of the tax, we also put the corporate income tax on parity with the individual income tax. So
Okay.
I just, for the audience, I guess, want them to understand, because the print's pretty small at the bottom, that this is individual income tax, not necessarily corporate, correct?
Yes. Matter of fact, on the zero and flat, I will add personal income tax rates at the top to make that clearer. We keep adding things to this, like the dots and everything else, and my staff tells me it's going to get too confusing, but we'll make a second chart just for corporate, because there are more states beginning to look at taking the corporate rate down as they take the individual rate down, because many businesses pay the individual rate, pass through subchapter S corporations pay that rate rather than the corporate rate. So if you have the two of them presented together, many states would want to move them together. So that's a good idea. I will make
So-
a second chart.
So just to follow up with that, part of the, one of the motivations to doing this in your presentation was economic activity and development, economic development and competitiveness. I'd be real interested to see what our surrounding states had for a corporate tax rate, particularly North Carolina. We compete regularly with them on economic development projects. Do you know offhand what their corporate, is it the 4.25 in North Carolina, or have they got a difference on the corporate income tax rate?
I don't know. I'll find out and I'll send it to you.
Okay.
I
Thank
know
you.
it's at zero in the next 2.5 years.
Thank you.
Senator Warwick, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And to our guest, your reputation precedes you, I would dare say. You've been working to cut taxes now for some 40 years, and we've been regular recipients of your mailers to sign on that we pledge not to raise any taxes. You posed the question of what to do about revenue, but you didn't provide answers that I heard, or if they weren't clearly stated, because that is the question we are tasked as government with meeting the needs of our population. And I know historically your view of government has been, I think you once were quoted as saying you'd like to shrink government down to the size where you could drown it in a bathtub. That's a view that's contrary to one that's held by many people that run for public service.
The actual quote is, do you want to abolish it? And I said, no, I just want to make it very, very small, using that analogy, but then making it clear that what I wanted to do in the federal government was to take it from where it was as a percentage of GDP to half of that. And which, in matter of fact, in the last 4 years of the Clinton administration, we were on track to do that. Instead, we went to more spending rather than to reduce it as a percentage of GDP. So yes, I think as a percentage of GDP, government should be smaller, not higher.
Well, as I
And that we can afford it.
You know, the Tabor tax initiative that was passed in Colorado.
Colorado, yeah.
Yes. And it proved to be disastrous for their state government, and they reversed it. It was not allowing any increased spending over the last year's budget spending, just to roughly describe it.
Okay, Tabor Taxpayer Bill of Rights put a limit on spending. Spending could not grow faster than inflation plus population. So the government couldn't grow faster than your wages. The government, and it was doing fine. There was a Republican governor who decided he wanted to spend more money. And so he supported an initiative, which only won by less than a point, to poke a hole in Tabor and raise that spending limit. Spending went up a great deal. The quality of life in that state has not gone up as a result, but they have now hit the higher spending limit than Tabor. It, for many years, protected Colorado from spending getting too out of control. Unfortunately, they've lost that spending limit. If the spending limit in California, the Gann Amendment, had stayed in place, just allowed government spending to increase as much as your salary, but not more, California would not have a deficit. California would not have a debt.
Well,
It has all those things now.
as I understood it, and I don't know if you were speaking nationwide as a strategy, but you did include in some of your comments that you would restrict spending in future years. You know, keep the budgets from growing.
Okay.
Was a part of the way I understood some states that you had suggested that maybe some states have already done. But we have massive needs in this state that you may not be aware of. 7,000 people on a waiting list for services for their children that have profound disabilities. We're one of 2 states in the country that doesn't provide needs-based universal tuition grants. I could go on and on with needs that we have now in many arenas that would argue for having a robust revenue to meet the needs of our citizens. But I suppose in this climate, when we're looking at the cuts that are being made to the federal budget, we're going to be highly impacted as states. And an example being reducing our FEMA money switches from 70, with the state carrying the heaviest burden for FEMA, and the emergency management really shrinking on the federal side. That's just one example, and we're a state that experienced a 100-year storm that charged through the southeast and damaged our economy and really hurt people working in agriculture. So when you take your message and you look at the federal cuts that are being made, the Pell Grants for higher education, food stamp authorization, the burden of it switching to states, how do you square reducing our state revenues with the needs that we have as a state and the unknown needs that are going to happen as higher ed and K through 12 and the cuts to enormous cuts that are coming down from that we still yet do not even have all tallied them up.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Each of the states, and I may not have been clear, but I said it many times, North Carolina's budget spending has gone up every year. It has gone up because revenue has come in. They have reduced marginal tax rates, and revenue has come in higher than before. They are raising more money with a 4.25% rate on individual income tax rather than a 7.5% rate. In Iowa, they're raising more money at 3.8% rather than at 8.6%. When you attract more people into the state and more business into the state and more investment into the state, you end up with both more money for individuals earning it, but also more tax revenue at lower rates. So the goal is, again, Florida at a 0% income tax rate gets more money in every year from sales tax and other taxes that aren't going up. They just there's more money because there are more people with higher earnings who have more resources who move to Florida. Again, there are more people in Florida than there are in New York. People leave New York with all of the, when you say people like services, if people liked services, government services, instead of the decision on their own, they would be moving from Florida where they have services but not as much money spent on them to New York where they have more money spent on them, but people obviously don't think those services are worthwhile because they leave New York. And so the question is, in each of these states, that when you've reduced taxes and you've had more growth, you actually have more resources and there is more money spent by the government. And so that's, I hear the question, but that's not the reality in other states. You can, and the other one is, do you really want to tell voters that there's no waste in state or local government? Nothing can be reformed?
Well, we saw what
None?
Doge did with their theory of waste.
I'm talking about in
Yeah.
Georgia. Do you tell your constituents there's no waste? You're not capable of finding any waste?
I don't believe that there's
Any waste at all?
We have been very conservative as a state, and
Okay.
I'll
Yes, so
hold the
we'll
rest
just
of my
make sure the
remarks.
questions flow one way and that the
Yeah,
questions go
thank
through
you.
the chair. Senator Ort, do you have any other questions?
Oh, no, I wanted just to pass the
Thanks.
mic back to the chair. is what I was saying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Dolezal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Norquist, for being here today.
Sure.
It would seem to me that somewhat of what you're describing anecdotally as it relates to New York and Florida is more so a macro story over the last decade of people moving from high tax, high regulation states to low tax, low regulation states. Florida last year was one of the few states with a positive GDP growth, largest GDP growth in the country. We had smaller, but still GDP growth, whereas a lot of these states are seeing negative GDP growth along with negative population growth. My question is this as it relates to somewhat the balancing test of balancing the needs of big business versus small business. We have somewhat had an unwritten policy, or certainly we've taken steps in the state of Georgia over the last 10 years to have specific tax incentives, specific tax carve-outs that essentially chose an industry. So we looked at a specific industry and said we either want to lure that industry here, keep that industry here, and we've done a tax credit. Those tax credits have somewhat our tax code looks like Swiss cheese as it relates to the number of tax credits that we have, and most of those are skewed towards larger businesses. I'm wondering if you or anyone that you know has looked into the growth of small to mid-sized businesses in the states as they have moved, or if they've been at 0%, because I think that that's probably a significant opportunity for growth within the state of Georgia over the next decade. And I don't know if there's any data on that you could point us to as it relates to essentially small business startups, small business relocations, or the growth of small businesses within states as they have moved towards 0.
Well, if your individual rate is 0 or your corporate rate is low, or in some states 0, North Carolina is going to 0, then companies big and small have a 0 corporate rate, and you don't have to give them any tax credits. And the small companies that are already there, or families that want to move with small family-run businesses, have the same advantages. I would be an advocate for having everybody pay the same rates and be treated equally with as low rates as you can get.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I did not know if there was any data or studies that would help undergird our principal position on that.
I'll find out. That's a good question. I don't know the small versus big, but that the amount of money that is sometimes given out in tax credits, which look a lot like spending or subsidies, how successful those are over time, I don't know. You'd think there'd be more discussion of it if it either worked or failed all the time.
One more question, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay with you.
Yes, sir.
It strikes me that we have this choice of ways that we tax people. We can tax productivity, we can tax consumption, we can tax property, or we can essentially do fees for service and tax for use. As you see North Carolina, Iowa, et cetera, going to 0, are you seeing them rebalance their mix with an increase in a consumption tax? One of the things that I hear kind of on the other side of this argument is, well, Georgia, if we look at Georgia as a mix of overall taxation per capita, we're at number 13 or 14, or it kind of depends on where you look. So we're in the better half of the country as it relates to that. And I think that what some people assume is that if we lower the marginal income tax rate, that we essentially are going to have to shift to a consumption tax. What I hear you saying as it relates to Carolina, though, is they essentially they're doing it and they're outrunning their need for revenue with growth. What have you seen in states as far as a reallocation of taxation mix, or have you seen them be able to lower the income tax rate without having to increase other taxes?
There has been some shifting around, but the bulk of it has been from money that would have gone into just making the government bigger, deciding not to spend that money. So revenue that this money was coming in like this, and you put a cap on spending here. It's this change, the delta there, that's where you get the reduction in taxes. You take this, and you don't take that anymore in the income tax.
Did North Carolina do that by statute?
They did that by statute.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Their triggers are statute. Ditto Iowa.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I've got a bunch of other questions, so I'll reserve mine. We'll go, Ardeen, sorry, Chairman, Senator Harbison, Chairman Harbison. Is that number 8?
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much for your input, Mr. Norquist. We appreciate it very much. My question is sort of in the vein of Senator Dolezal. So how do you envision the plugging the hole, so to speak, of the absence of this for certain taxes going to come in, of the reliability, I should say, of the income tax? We switch into the consumption, or how does that work, and how does that poll in your experiences? And are the people in those states, you got more growth? How do you fill those holes with more taxes, and what kind of taxes would that be? Can you sort of give me a synopsis of that, a picture of that in your mind?
Sure. Asking about the popularity of it, North Carolina's, the party doing this has got 2/3 supermajorities as a result of moving in this direction from where it was. Our friends in Kansas that decided to go to a flat rate tax doing this now has 2/3 supermajorities as a result. And has maintained them. They're popular positions as opposed to unpopular positions. Nobody's lost an election, if that's the question, for supporting phasing the income tax to zero. Several people in Kansas, 4 people have lost elections for opposing the phase down. And governors in West Virginia, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Louisiana have all won elections on the issue of going to zero. So in terms of electoral politics, it's been a popular position. And as I mentioned, in Illinois, the opportunity was there to say, let's raise taxes, and a Democrat supermajority said no on that. So I think the popularity of it is fairly clear. Your question of the way, when you have a growing economy, more money's coming in. So if assuming if the economy is growing, and if you don't spend all that money that's coming in, if you then you can take some of that money that you're not spending and reduce taxes. And that is my recommended way to reduce the tax burden, not to shift from one tax to another. There are cases where some economies have, people think there have been tax loopholes or whatever that you would press out or something. That's up to states to look at. Sometimes somebody mentioned if you get rid of the income tax, all those tax credits that people in the income tax have, it's interesting, some people go, well, I want my tax credit. Well, there's no income tax. What do you mean tax credit? They still want their tax credit. I'm not quite sure how that works, but I have heard that as somebody whining about, I don't get a tax credit for income taxes I don't pay. I haven't followed that one completely, but the reducing the income tax has a very strong, helpful effect on economic growth, which raises other tax revenue without raising other tax rates. So whatever other taxes you have, the gasoline taxes or anything else, you'll have more money because people will do more of the other stuff because they've got more money and more opportunity to do stuff. They'll buy better cars and pay better auto taxes. They'll buy more stuff and pay more sales taxes. But that's not increase in the tax rate, but there is more revenue for the government that flows from that.
But my final question, thank
Yeah.
you very much. I noticed you said you some states worked very carefully and incremental in reducing the taxes down to zero. In that vein, I'm still sort of trying to figure out how do you, if you got significant growth, as in Georgia we've experienced, how do you do that? If we had zero, so we go back and revisit that, or you're thinking the consumption side will take care of that? I mean, just what is your theory on that, or your practicality that you've noted on that?
One way of approaching phasing the income tax down is, again, there are others, but the one that most states are doing, and I would recommend building off of for what other changes you want, is you say, when revenue, here's what we're going to spend, okay? When revenue comes above that, you take the income tax down, okay? Maybe you take a certain amount of it to go to schools or something, and then the rest of it goes to income tax cuts. But you set the amount, when revenue comes above this, X goes to permanently reduce the income tax. But it doesn't drop your revenue, because it's the unexpected additional. And you take that down and use that so that revenue keeps going forward, but it's the additional revenue that you don't then sit up and come up with new ideas of ways to spend new money that showed up, but rather leave that in the hands of people. And that has worked in each of the states that are doing this. Again, in Arizona with a 2.5% rate, that used to be a much higher rate, continues to bring in revenue.
And I guess the state's rainy day fund, for one of a better expression, that would be gone, or how would you see that? If it's not coming in, you can't stack the dollars to make sure you can respond to floods like in Texas or some other areas. I'm just trying to see in my mind how that would work.
Every state has at least a rainy day fund for crises. I mentioned that our friends in Iowa set up a rainy day fund for tax cuts. So there was one for floods, and then there was one, because they couldn't decide how to spend the money, they said, this will go here and we'll use it to pay for tax cuts. If we set up a tax cut and there's a year where there's a slow growth, and so you weren't going to get a tax cut, this will fill in the divot for that period. They haven't had to use it because they had the growth every year. But that was a tax cut, and I believe Louisiana set up one, which was a tax cut rainy day fund. But I hope, I did not mean to confuse and suggest the rainy day fund was used for tax cuts. You have a rainy day fund, like a rainy day fund, one set up for tax cuts, meaning there's a specific use for it. It's not part of the normal budget. You have to have a real separate reason for going after it. It is like one. It is not the same thing. No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it started slow. You got a lot of questions now, but I want to ask him first
Yeah,
just
yeah.
to make sure I understand. If we were to budget, and to Chairman Harbison's question, if you were to budget for a rainy day fund, and then you were to use excess revenue to fund the reduction of your income tax, you still would fund your rainy day fund, correct?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
So, hope that helps clarify that question. Chairman Huffstadler.
I'll try to be quick because I know there's a lot of questions, but I serve on the National Conference of State Legislatures. They have a finance board. We met 2 Sundays ago and spent most of the day working on this very subject. But the interesting thing about Mississippi, I don't know if you know what happened over there, but the Senate was dragging their feet. The governor wanted to do it, the House wanted to do it, and they put a trigger in there that said only if the revenue is 115% of the previous year do we do this. Well, they made a mistake and the decimal was in the wrong place, and it said it's only 1.15% of the previous year. And they said, oh my God, we got to fix this in conference committee. And the House said, we're good with the bill like it is, and just passed it out as it stood. So they're starting to cut the income tax rate despite the Senate's foot drag. I don't know if you followed that over there or not, but
Yes, we did. The Senate leader was annoying, and this typo was 15, 16 times written out and typed out in their budget, which makes you wonder how it's a typo. So I think he did it because he's running for governor, and then he wanted to claim to his spending friends that it was a typo. But
okay.
I don't know. Somebody's going to write a book on that.
We're starting to get to some concrete answers here. Any other questions from the members of the committee?
I thought that was a secret, by the way. They're telling the stories.
I almost called you chairman, leader, and Avatarte.
Jason's fine too.
Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, Mr. Norquist, just to more clarity on what you said earlier, that eliminating the income tax overall creates a pathway to reduce all or most government taxes. Say what you said again? When you were with Senator Harbison? I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Is that a true, false statement, or how does eliminating the income tax in totality, for example, does it help locals reduce property taxes? Does it help these other kind of veins where, I think the most hated tax in the state, or the most hated tax in my community, is the property tax? How does this put more money in people's pockets to where, as taxes by a lot of these local governments, I think one of our budget leaders last year said that, school boards, for example, are sitting on $2 billion worth of surpluses that are not being put back into education. So if we're putting more money into Georgians' pockets because they're not having to pay income tax, how does it address kind of those other local issues that, we've seen local governments take all this COVID money, still raise their taxes, not putting it back into the people because they were borrowing, the federal money.
Yeah.
So it's created just this really, big government kind of scenario that we're having to live through, but we're also trying to unwind because, as one of the senators, Senator Dozal mentioned, if I'm a plumber, I'm an electrician, I could do away with my taxes, cap my taxes, but if the local government politician's still raising my property taxes, I'm still kind of,
Yeah.
just that dynamic.
Okay.
I'm
Before
sorry.
you answer, Grover,
Yeah.
I want, Mr. Norquist, I want to make it clear to you that Georgia does not, our state government does not levy a property tax. So just want to make sure that's
Yeah.
clear to you and to our listeners.
Yeah. No, some states do have it, and have one. When you take the income tax down, or you're in a state like Florida or Texas, which doesn't have one, that you have more growth. When you have more growth, this I think gives you an opportunity for the state to focus on the misbehavior by local governments. You saw this in California, where people, in Prop 13 back in 1978, people revolted against the runaway property taxes, and they put a cap on rates, statewide, constitutional cap on the rate, and on the growth, 2% on the assessment. Boom. In Florida, there's a 3% cap on the growth of your property tax. Beyond that, you've got to go to a vote of the people and get it. In Massachusetts, where I lived before I emigrated to the United States, in 1980, they put a measure on the ballot, which passed overwhelmingly, because the people aren't crazy, just the government, which said put a limit on the growth of, fix the rate, and put a growth of 2.5% on assessments, and did a whole bunch of other things to limit government spending, and both spending and tax increases. I think requiring local governments when they borrow, this is the problem Texas has. Texas is state governments but the local governments, they have measures, they put measures on the ballot to borrow money, and they put them on any number of days. They even put them in places, and I think they may have fixed this by now. They used to move the voting booths from one date to another. And I don't know how you're supposed to figure out where they were. Teachers union knew where they were, but not everybody else. So voting booths in one place and on election day in November, never any other time, okay? You can't ask 12 people to vote and, you know, and indebt the city. Those kind of limitations are very, very important. And you can solve the state's problems and leave people at, in a very difficult position where the local governments go, oh, well, did they just cut your taxes at the state level? We'll grab that money here.
I think that's a legitimate concern, because I think we saw it during the pandemic, whether you want to call it free fees, borrowing money, whatever.
Okay.
And I think the income that a teacher makes, for example, if the people around this table gave teachers a pay raise, but if I'm a local school board and I'm collecting the property tax and I'm still not giving the teacher pay raises, basically you're cutting their pay by raising taxes. But with your plan, or Lieutenant Governor's plan, basically we'd be putting some money back into the pockets, but I would still be concerned about that local politician wanting to increase their government spending and what they say their needs are, without helping the citizens who are basically having to, tie up their own family budgets.
If you're going to have limits on property taxes, the mistake they made in California is when you sell your house in California, the higher assessment, that when you sell it,
Right.
that it goes to the higher assessment of the value of what you'd sell it at now. So you all your life you had the lower assessment. You sell it to somebody who's a higher assessment. What does that do? That makes you can sell your house for much less than you thought it was worth, because it's got this boat anchor of the higher property taxes when the person you sell it to. They made that mistake in Florida, but they changed it. They fixed it in Florida. They didn't fix it in California. You need to make sure that lower assessment stays with the house when it gets sold. Or the person that you did the big favor to, all his or her life is going to be really disappointed when they go to sell the house as part of their nest egg and discover it's not worth anywhere near what they thought it was.
And I would say too, Mr. Chairman, I'll wrap up because I know you need to move on. Having served on a city council, having served on a school board, I mean, during this kind of world we're in today, fast forwarding, looking back at the intentions of, at least in Georgia, these millage rate caps, which I think are around 20 for local governments in some cases. Should there be a debate to reduce that millage rate cap if some local governments are going to potentially abuse it and not put money back into the taxpayer?
Texas says you can raise it higher if there's an emergency. There's a flood 75 miles away from you, and these guys call an emergency, and they start raising taxes. Watch out for emergency.
I agree. Thank you, sir.
I got a couple of questions off of that, and then I know I've got Dr. Rhett who has questions too. The comment was made earlier, I think Chairman Dolezal made it, about Georgia's tax code being Swiss cheese. Grover, we're looking at some things here in Georgia, consumption-based tax, sales tax. Our sales tax in Georgia, percentage-wise, obviously Tennessee's is higher, but just on a even percent, we bring in $1 billion less per percent on sales tax than Tennessee, when we certainly have more people. Have you seen, and the reason being is the Swiss cheese example that Chairman Dolezal gave earlier. We've special interest tax cutted different entities, and the only person who doesn't have a special interest is the everyday working person. Have you seen other states try to address special interest tax credits, sales tax or income tax, in the process of reducing the income tax overall?
Yes, and that has been part of some of the states' moves. Just keep in mind the reason why some of the special interests have those is that they're very painful to take on. So keep a list of how many people you're going to fight at once.
Very fair point. Senator Rhett, what number are you? Number 10?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think they already answered my question. I was concerned about, when they were talking about the consumption tax, I was just concerned, would you have to expand the sales base to offset the elimination of the state income tax? Because you know, money is being taken, but you have to replace it somewhere.
The other states have not found that necessary. I do not, you don't have to. You could if you wanted to, but you don't have to.
On the consumption, on back to sort of piggybacking on Chairman Rhett, or Senator Rhett's question and then Chairman Dolezal's comment earlier, when the other states locked in the dedication of excess income into code, can you give us an example of what they locked that percentage rate at? So you're not cutting spending, you're just slowing the growth of state government. Did they say 25% of the excess over what is budgeted for the year? Did they say 50? Did they say 100? Do you recall what any of the other states did for their dedication of excess income?
No, I'll pull the North Carolina numbers because that's the longest running, but I don't know the number offhand.
Gotcha. And
That's the best
I know that
number
was
to
what
look at.
Patrick was here to
Yes,
tell us a little bit more about, and that's not fair for him
Yeah.
today. For those of y'all.
He's the expert. He would have the Iowa and the North. He babysat. He lives in North Carolina. He lived that thing, so he would have that, and I'm sure it changed year by year as they were getting smarter as they did it.
Gotcha. And
But also Iowa, the other state, which started early and learned a lot. Iowa and North Carolina are two to look for.
gotcha.
And they would love to sit down with you and walk through the way they did it.
I thought I saw a question from my left side.
Less drama than Mississippi.
Back to Senator Orrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's often called regressive taxation when you don't tax based on income, but you do sales tax and consumption tax and that sort of thing, because that hits the pocketbooks of the low and moderate income, middle class folks who have to use much more of their earnings to much greater percentage of their earnings go to consumption and purchasing, and it's called a regressive taxation model, and I appreciate your comments on that. The other.
Can I give him a second to answer that first, and if you got another question?
Oh yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regressive taxation, yeah.
Well, you can tax everybody $5 for something, or you could take it as a percentage of the cost of the product, or you could take it as a percentage of their income, or you could have a higher percentage of their income based on their income. Karl Marx liked the last one. Progressive income taxes.
Progressive income taxes are Marxian? Is that what you're saying?
It's on the first page of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. Yes, that's where the idea comes from.
Haven't read that.
You should. It's full of lots of bad ideas. But that is an argument. But in the United States of America, as we look at our map, we see 8 states in the last 5 years have moved. Where did we go with it? Everybody should have the cheerful map. Oh, there we are. 8 states in the last 5 years have moved to a single rate tax, where everybody pays the same rate, as opposed to a graduated, a progressive income tax. So, Massachusetts went the other way, although it'll be on the ballot to repeal that in 2 years. But 8 states went the other way. So it's states choose whether to go with Marx's proposal or not. So I think the more the states are moving to, well, a majority of states are with a single rate tax. Some it's zero, some it's not, and some it's a non-zero number. But most states have a flat rate tax.
Well, my-
Single rate tax.
My second question is,
But every state's allowed to have their own rules.
so far, right now. My other question is the cuts that are coming down, and on the federal level, which are going to be hit some this year, some following the next election year, and the questionable wisdom of reducing state revenue in the face of so many unknowns. And I didn't get a clear answer from you on that, but my main concern with what you've laid out is an endless, that each state, when they remove income tax, reduce it, remove it, zero it out, will have economic growth because the investors, the companies, the employers, capital will rush into the state to take advantage of this new zero income tax. Well, that's an in some. How many states get rushed into? Do the states at the tail end not get the benefit? I mean, if you had your dream of no income tax anywhere in the country, how does this theory of it's going to grow your economy to cut your income tax because you're going to be the state that's receiving all this new revenue from the rush of capital to the state because of cutting, zeroing the income tax.
Well, right.
How does that reaches an end point, does it not?
No, right. I mean, right now, the success of low-tax states does come at the expense of California, New York, and Michigan, and stuff like Minnesota, who are treating workers poorly, and so people leave and business leaves. But if those states go back to where they used to actually treat people well, you would see resources both stay in those states, but also come from other countries. And they'd be attracting capital and workers from around the world. There's capital around the world, not just in the United States. And there's capital is formed when people save and invest rather than spend their money. They say, well, instead of buying a really fancy car, I'm going to invest in the future. And you do that when there's a good rate of return on that, but not when there are heavy taxes on it. In Britain, people talked about back in the 60s, 70s, when Britain was doing so poorly, not everyone, there were all these Mercedes around and British, what's the fancy British car? Rolls Royces, because people weren't investing. There was no money. You didn't invest because the taxes were so high, so you bought fancy cars. And then when the economy's doing better, fewer fancy cars, more investment. Rather have a 401k than a big car.
Well, you know, the promise of lowering taxes is always welcome. However, the very same people that will favor lowering taxes want the ambulance there in 4 minutes when the loved one is having a health crisis. Mm-hmm. That requires investment by government to allow that to happen. And I'm so concerned about people who, families that are coping with illness, but particularly long-standing conditions of their children that are going to require much more support than a family income can meet, children needing full-time nursing care, et cetera, conditions in the family. And so my not having to pay income tax does not allow me to build out the infrastructure that is required for profoundly disabled people, just as one example. And that's the collective power of government to amass the resources to build infrastructure, to deliver services. The individual family cannot build out those services. It must come from external support to the family budget. And that is, I think, the kind of suffering that can be caused when we reduce government down to the size to drown it in a bathtub, as you put it.
The idea that only the state can provide health care gave us the VA, and it doesn't work very well.
The idea of what, excuse me?
The idea that only the state can handle health care gives us the British health system, the Canadian health system,
Well,
and the VA.
it works well in all the other developed countries of the world. They
Okay.
have a universal health care for their citizens.
That's why Americans go to Canada for health care.
So I'm going to, Senator, if
thank
there's
you,
not
Mr. Thank you,
if
Mr.
there's not a
Chairman.
question, Senator, I'm going to stop the colloquy.
Thank you.
All righty. Are there any other questions from members of the committee at this point in time? Mr. Norquist, thank you. I want to sum up a few of the things that I think you said and make sure I'm correct as we put concrete to what the ideas that we will bring
Okay.
forward.
And I'm gonna, my cheerful staff will thank you for their new job of getting a corporate income tax map too.
Yes, sir. Want to make sure that I'm correct on what I've written down, summarizing what you've said so far.
Taxes suck. What was the other one?
And are an impediment to growth and investment.
Yes.
I do understand that part. The southeastern states are moving towards zero rapidly.
Yes.
That the way most of these southeastern states have done it is a dedication of excess income. In other words, their budgets continue to rise. They dedicated a portion of the income over their budgeted amount to offset income taxes in the future. Is that correct?
Yes, they set different ones, but beyond, one is beyond inflation plus population.
And then dedicating
You
a
can
portion
set any limits you want, just set a limit, one that you're comfortable with.
and setting it before you have the revenue.
Yes.
I understand
Yes,
why that
that's right.
matters. And then you also mentioned that one of the first steps to doing this was a flat tax. Georgia's already implemented that mode several years ago, so we're moving in this direction in a way that it sounds like you would think is prudent to begin with.
Yes.
The last comment I want to make with you here is that doing that quick math with Tennessee numbers, if all the other facts are correct, that Tennessee's sales tax brings in an additional $1 billion than Georgia's on a percent, not on a gross basis, on a percent basis. Each percent of Tennessee's sales tax, which I don't know Tennessee's population, but I'm certain it's less than Georgia's, brings in $1 billion more. We charge a 4% sales tax. That's $4 billion additional dollars. Y'all, we could reduce the state income tax another 15% if we simply had the level sales tax base that Tennessee does. So I want to highlight that for you. We've already commend you in advance. You've reduced the state income tax roughly 15% already from 6% to 5.09, 5.19 currently. That's 15%. You can do that again with one slow move. So I don't know that that's the move to make, but I highlight that for you only to say this goal is achievable. It is not that far-fetched. So thank you for highlighting those things today. Any final comments you'd like to have or any final questions from the committee before we let Mr. Norquist go about his day? Or is it a question or a comment?
It's really in reference to the points that you just made. I'm
Sure.
sorry, Mr. Chair.
If it's to the points I made, do you want us to release Mr. Norquist first?
Well, it goes to the question of regressive tax policy.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and when you raise sales tax, that is a deeper cut. It disadvantages the middle class and the lower income families. It puts everybody. It's called regressive because it eats into the household budget of low and moderate and middle class people. They're disproportionately taxed compared to the taxes on the rich.
So that's a fair comment, but let me point back to you that what I'm talking about doing is currently businesses and individuals are getting special interest sales tax breaks. We're not talking about groceries or anything like that applies to the masses as a whole. But when you're talking about special sales tax income breaks, and we can show that a state with a population, the Pro Tem brought up a population of 7 million, is creating $1 billion additional dollars per percent than our state with 11 billion. The thing that we've done that's caused our problem with state income tax and makes this a somewhat harder decision is we've given all the friends up here a one-off while the folks sitting back home haven't gotten anything.
I understand.
And if
yeah.
I were them, I would be pissed. So that is the last comment I want to make, Mr. Norquist. I saw you raise your hand.
You might want to reconsider that, Mr.
I-
Chair.
When I go to Texas and I go to Florida, sometimes those guys are like the tortoise and the hare. They're the hare. They're sitting there going, "Oh, we're so far ahead. We don't have an income tax." I remind them, there are people, there are states coming right behind them and are going to pass them on the income tax and the growth. And it is delightful and wonderful to see that Georgia's on that path. And someday I'll go down to Florida and tell them how to catch up with you. Thanks.
Mr. Norquist, thank you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you.
You got that slow applause, the same the Lieutenant Governor got right there for yourself. Well done. The other, I feel just out of respect for you to tell you, Patrick, who was the person who understood the details behind North Carolina and I believe Ohio or Indiana is not, or Iowa, sorry, is not going to be with us today. He had a car accident on the way here. So y'all keep him and his family in your prayers. We will, I'm sure, hear from him at a later date, but I wanted to let you know it was not something that you can't plan for that one. So that's why that change has been made. I do want to give an opportunity for members around the table if you'd like to say any comments first, and then we're going to take public comment. We will vacate this room at 12 o'clock. So start with our right and work on my right, start our way around. Senator Watson, if there's anything you'd like to say.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, and maybe for you, Mr. Chairman, I know we've used our tax credits as incentives for businesses, and our state has a gratuities clause that prevents us from doing other things. But just a topic for discussion there to put that out there. We may need other tools as everyone goes to no income tax. How do we remain competitive and to continue economic development in our state if we don't have that as an incentive?
Thank you. Good comment. Senator Rhett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My only comment is I think we need to make sure we move in a prudent manner towards trying to achieve the goals that you've set forth in this committee. And I think Senator Orrock made a good point. We don't want to push this too fast where it becomes a regressive tax instead of a progressive tax, because it has a big effect on the average working person. So I think if we keep those in consideration as we move forward.
Chairman Hufstedler.
Thank you. A couple of comments. One, I want to address the flat income tax rate we went to, and I know some people can say that can be regressive, but it certainly wasn't in Georgia. We upped the deductions at the lower end and made sure nobody paid a penny more in income taxes, which can happen if you have a graduated rate and you just go to a flat rate. So as it is now, a family of four in Georgia has to make between $50,000 and $60,000, depending on their situation, before they pay their first penny of state income tax. So it was not a regressive tax when we did it. The second comment is not this year, but the previous year we had passed Senate Bill 366, and I know there's at least 6 members here that were co-sponsors of that, transparency, that said we don't know all the money that's taken off all the top before we even get to the budget, and it should be in the budget. And we passed that out. Here's the budget, which our chairman works pretty hard on. And they said, you know what, we can't do that. Governor signed the bill, but they said we can't do that because it's going to make the budget too long, because all the tax exemptions we give is this big. And so our chairman managed to get a summary of the top heavy hitters in the budget this year for the first time. Here's the solution right here.
Chairman Harbison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you convening this committee to look at a very timely topic in the state of Georgia. But I just want to speak to the perspective that one of my other members spoke to. I served on the school board in Muscogee County as well, and I think it's fair to say they are in the past, and when I served on, they were very, well, they had some concerns about having no income tax to bolster that state property tax. I'm sorry, I should say, to make sure that we could pay our bills. And in other areas about delivery of services, the fire, and the public things that we do in the state of Georgia. And I don't think that would be effective, but there's that feeling that undercurrent that could possibly be affected. So I think we should, as Mr. Norquist said, move very carefully in those ways that we could prevent any problem that we could have by moving to either flat tax or no tax in the state of Georgia. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Pro Tem nominee?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that was a great discussion, very insightful, and I learned a lot. And I do like the idea of, the triggered concept where it's a fiscally responsible approach, where if your revenue exceeds a certain threshold, then you can, which is really the approach we've taken in Georgia with our lowering of the state income tax. So I'm looking forward to learning more. It did occur to me as we were talking, I don't know why I've never thought of this before, but I guess if you have a zero state income tax, you don't have to file a state income tax return, which that would be music to my ears. So thank you.
Our majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for putting this meeting together. I mean, this is a pretty complex topic, and I'm sure those at home are watching and probably got to get out a calculator and figure all this out with the rest of us. I do think at the end of the day, a lot of these small businesses who are plumbers, electricians, they're not these corporations making all this money, but, $1, $2, $3 million and have capital expenditures on equipment, workforce, the high cost of insurance, and then the dreaded property tax. And I would just make one comment respectfully to my colleague from Atlanta, as we talk about what's regressive. I think the most regressive thing right now is we're seeing people tax out of their homes. We're seeing them tax out of their businesses. And in Atlanta, we can have a debate too. As taxes go up on the businesses and small businesses, I mean, we're not really seeing crime go down. So, I mean, we can have a tax conversation all day long. But I do think this is an important conversation we have to figure out what is the long-term solution. I think we're at this moment in time in Georgia history where a lot of the tax code, a lot of things we've seen on the books have been there for half a century or longer. I mean, I know I joke with the chairman about some of these states that have no income tax, and some of that happened when they were founded. But I also think that in that vein, we've seen those state leaders, especially more recently, because of increased populations or even reduction of populations, and priorities, have this conversation to figure out how do we give more power to the people, because tax is a barrier to freedom. And we can have this conversation all day long about regressive this and that. But I think this General Assembly has been very positive, has made those investments where we need to for the positive without hurting blue-collar workers, low-income families, and if nothing else, empowering them to be successful and put more money in their pockets. So, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to the future meetings with you and the President of the Senate and our colleagues here to have this debate across the state.
Senator O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being generous with the committee members in this fulsome discussion that we've had today. I welcome the follow-up meetings and the digging deep, going into the deep end of the pool on these issues, and appreciate the comments of my colleagues around the table. I was concerned that I think we do need to look at the definitions of progressive taxation and regressive taxation, because these are long-established concepts that are backed up with facts. And I was concerned that our presenter continued to call them Marxist and Marxian repeatedly. That's certainly not the view of mainstream economists across the nation. It's been discussion that certainly merits attention, and appreciate your leadership on convening us. Thank you.
Chairman Dolezal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll waive so we can get to some of the public comments sooner.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just be brief. I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor for getting us all together and talking about a very important issue. This is something that we need to consider, and I appreciate Grover Norquist's expertise and the experience he has of giving us a statewide view of how other states have done this and those that have done it well, and how it's working out for those states. And I also want to thank Chairman Huffstetler for his good leadership over the last several years and reminding us of the way we have approached our tax policy has been a thoughtful approach. And I appreciate that. And I think the combination of that, plus us asking the question of what in this state, what is fair to tax? And if it's hardworking Georgians and they work harder and get taxed more, maybe that's the beginning point where we start to ask about the fundamental fairness of that. And so with that, I'm glad we're here. Thanks.
And Senator Gooch.
Good morning. I want to echo some of the same comments that have already been made. I'd also like to remind the members that this isn't the first time this has been looked at. So if you go back to 2010, there was a special council on tax reform and fairness for Georgians. The final report came out on January 7th, 2011. A lot of good information in here we need to look at because a lot of the work's already been done. Now we just need to go and update it. It's too bad the General Assembly back then didn't implement these recommendations. We wouldn't be sitting here today. We'd have a zero tax. So a lot of work to be done, a lot of questions to be answered. I think today was a good start, but we look forward to the rest of the meetings ahead. Thank you for having us here today.
Thank you, and thank you for pointing that out. I think that report showed a quick way to 3%. It would have been a 50% reduction almost immediately. So the same people who did that report will be some people who I expect will testify at our future meetings for those who are for planning purposes. I just want to point out the map on the wall. That shows us that we will be going to zero. The other states have, and those around us that are one state away are doing it too. The die has been cast. We will be going to zero, or there'll be other people in these seats that are taking the state income tax to zero. The question now is about how and when. So the comments that were brought up today by many of you, I think, are extremely prudent. We're going to work through those over the coming months. I look forward to talking with you more about it. I also don't want us to lose fact of the good work you've already done. While we know that the task ahead is going to be arduous, remember that you have already taken some of these steps. You've reduced the state income tax by 15% already. You have taken and returned $6 billion to Georgians already. You have saved roughly $500 million a year over the next 20 years by taking and cash funding bond packages already. So you've made a lot of these moves already. You've made hard decisions. There may be a few more that come, but you're capable of doing it. You've done it already. Those who are concerned they'll lose an income tax credit, remember, if you don't owe income taxes, you don't need a credit. And those who are concerned that they won't have a transferable credit, well, there's still a debate about the corporate income tax. So that would create a need still for income tax credits on a transferable basis. But those who aren't able to hire a lobbyist up here would not need the corporate income tax credit as much as they would need the personal income tax taken to zero. So those are my comments as where I think we're headed. We will be meeting again soon. We've got some time now. I want to ask if there's anyone from the audience. I would ask if you don't mind. We got the comment sheet already. Oh, you've already signed up. Thank you. And the first person to sign up was Mr. Dennis Futch. And if you don't mind, I'm going to ask if you would please keep your comments somewhat brief, realizing that others may wish to comment as well. And we do have a hard stop in this room at 12 noon.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dennis Futch. For y'all that don't know who I am, I'm from South Georgia, from Moultrie, from Sam Watson's district, Colquitt County. I've been an accountant for 35 years. I'm an enrolled agent. I'm one of 63 Kiplinger advisors in America that write for the Kiplinger magazine and Kiplinger Online and so forth. I know a little bit about taxes. It could be said it would be counterproductive for me to want y'all to eliminate the state income tax, but it's not about me. It's about what's best and the right thing for the people of the state of Georgia. And that's what I want to do, and that's what I want to help you do, because I believe it would increase economic activity, bring more businesses and retirees to Georgia by far, and the data proves it. Now, let me make something clear. We're not talking about reducing revenue or reducing services or social engineering. We're talking about how do we change where the money comes from that pays for all those things. It's not about any of the rest of that, in my opinion. And I also want to say it was a good step forward on property tax when you passed FLOST, but I think you need to revisit this year. I think giving counties and school boards the ability to opt out was a mistake. And we need to go back and look at that again. And I think the discussion here, in light of fairness, in regards to property tax, especially seniors, 67 and older, we should look at using the surpluses that we're going to have, and they will come, to eliminate property taxes on homesteads for those 67 years and older. You should own your home at some point in your life without having to pay the government something. I think we could even give $1,000, up to $1,000 tax credit back to the counties on everybody's property tax with the plan. I think there might be some other taxes that we need to look at, maybe raising the excise taxes, like on the sin taxes, tobacco, alcohol. If those people are going to consume those things and be sicker and be a burden on Medicaid and the health system, well, they need to pay a little more to consume those things. If gambling becomes something that y'all pass, well, I think the state needs to take about a 20% cut in that. There's other things that we can do. We can look at Texas, we can look at Iowa, we can look at all these states, but we can go to a zero income tax inside of 5 years and have a $2 billion more surplus per year than we have today. The numbers support it. And I encourage you to take a look at it. I provided this plan that I wrote to Chairman Tillery. Anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm easy to find. Just Google me.
Well, I'll make sure that the members of the committee get it too. Mr. Futch, you did give that to me, and I'll make sure they get a copy.
Well, thank you. That's really all I've got to say. I appreciate being here. I appreciate y'all being here. And it's a note that all the lieutenant governor candidates are in the room. So I guess our next lieutenant governor is going to be on this committee.
Next speaker is Mr. Duffy.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Futch. Mr. Duffy, Jim Duffy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My comments will be fairly brief because most everybody here knows what the fair tax is and what it does. It changes that stack of papers that were over there a moment ago into that much because it eliminates all exceptions, exemptions, and need for the special interest to be accommodated. There was a study done actually a little bit more contemporaneous than the 2011 one, and that was in 2015, when there was a similar committee headed up by Judson Hill in the Senate, and as out of that committee, they asked Mr. Bob Bushman, the economist with Georgia State, to do an analysis of the Fair Tax Act for the state of Georgia that I presented to them, to analyze it and come up with a rate at that time that would bring income in to replace the current amount of income from both corporate income tax and personal income tax. The rate, including something that took the progressivity into account, or the regressivity, is that it included a prebate or a monthly family allowance that nobody, no legal citizen, would pay taxes up to the poverty rate of spending, which for a family of four would be approximately $40,000 of spending before they would pay any taxes at all. Everybody would have that available to them, and that way nothing about the sales tax or the consumption tax would be regressive. As an aside to that, I asked the chairman, or former chairman of Home Depot, after he made a presentation to my Kiwanis Club some years ago, Frank Blake, the retired chairman, what do you think about the fair tax? And he said, I think the fair tax would be really good for the small business people that work with us, the journeymen, the construction workers, the folks that we cater to in doing their business. But we as a major corporation can handle pretty much whatever the government throws at us because we've got the assets to do it. The fair tax would take care of that discrepancy. It would be simple, transparent. It would handle the way that Mr. Bushman came up with his numbers. He took how much money comes in from all of the taxes that we have currently. He applied a rate to that to give the equivalent income using only the taxes from the tax from the consumption tax, and that rate was 6.42% to account for the, at that time, 6% income tax and 4% sales tax. We need to get rid of the current sales tax system also. The fair tax would take care of that as well as the income tax. That's all I got to say right now. I'd like to have an opportunity at some future meeting to give more details on how that would work, but it could be done immediately, and then the other states out there would be looking at us as to who they're competing with, not with why we're competing with them. We right now, we're sort of, an old barnyard saying is that if you are the smallest piglet in the mud pie, you get the hind source of income or food, as it were, in that case, and therefore you're the smallest. So we don't want to be the hind whatever. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. I have to say that I think we all enjoyed you parsing your language on that last comment. That was something. Thank you for your comments. Susie Voiles. And Mr. Duffy, I think you left your number here so we can get back in touch with you.
First of all, I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to thank everybody else who is here today. This has been something that has been of interest to me because it's been passed down to me for a long time from my family as to who is responsible for what. But the one thing I want to thank you in particular, when I moved here as a new bride, I was mortified that I had to pay taxes on my groceries. So thank you for recognizing where everyday people need to have some help. And along with that, what I want to share with you is Florida in particular. They pay no taxes on their drugs. They pay no taxes on their groceries. They pay no taxes on the things that people are afraid of are going to happen if we go to a zero-based. Eagle Forum is 100% behind what you all are doing. We see this as being something not only for the individual, but for our state. When you start to lower taxes, you know, we're talking about special groups and things like that. One of the things that begins to happen is innovation can begin to flourish. And we create new businesses, we create new tax bases. And this isn't something we should be afraid of. This is something we should get ahead of. And one of the things I want to remind you, let's look at this in a very simple matter. Let's look at what has happened to counties like Fulton County, who have not responded to what other counties around them have done with their property taxes, how they have not given seniors exemptions, for example, how they have not looked into this. And so what do those people do? they move out to counties that do that, and that's what we're seeing. Look at our neighbors. Our neighbors, they're providing what the citizens here in Georgia not only want, but what we need. This can be done responsibly, and I thank you for taking a look at this. And almost all my points were taken by everybody else, so I'm not going to say those, but thank you so much. Let's make sure that we respond to the needs of the people. What is the purpose of government? It's basically to protect the people, not provide for the people. And I think we can do that. I think we can come up with a good solution. I look at the heads that are here. You guys are phenomenal. Thank you so much for all you're doing.
Thank you, Ms. Voles. Last person who signed up, Sini Zabendorf. Shawnee, sorry. When you stood up, I realized your name. Sorry.
Sorry. Shawnee Zappendorf, Dawson County. I just want to bring a point. This has happened to us several years ago. So towards the end of the year, I asked my accountant, and we found out about the Georgia Gold Program. I said, hey, go and sign up for that. We want to donate the money towards it. And then when she got around to it, end of the year, it was already full. It's like a pass-through for your taxes, for those that don't know. So the following year, we're like, okay, we need to go ahead and get ahead of this. It was almost full by probably February. And the amount that we had to pay was actually $10,000. That was the max at the time for corporate tax. So literally, we had to pay our taxes $10,000 in advance, not to have it, pre-taxed. And so we can donate to, at the time, Riverside Military Academy, which is who wanted to donate part of our money to. And I'm sitting there wondering, why wouldn't everybody want this? Well, the pass-through people probably won't have a job now. We're not going to have tax credits, right? And that's not the only entity. So there are multiple people that, if we can get ahead of that and work with those organizations that are not going to have a job, this way we have less opposition, because that's something that I would like to see happening to our state, but we also want to kind of work with those people and get ahead of that program. And we don't need the tax credit. We can give our money and donate to whoever we want. And that's the most important thing, that because they're citizens to our state as well. So they can understand that they can choose who they want to give their money to, just like the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shawnee. That is the end of the folks who've signed up. We have 7 minutes. Is there anyone else in the audience who did not sign up and wishes to say something? We've got one gentleman. Yes, sir.
I must have missed the sheet. Good morning. I'm Brian Allen, Vice Chair, Libertarian Party of Georgia. I'm glad that this committee was created and that it's premised on figuring out how to eliminate Georgia's income tax rather than whether to eliminate it. I would like to emphasize one thing, though, which is why the income tax should be eliminated. Income tax deprives people of the fruit of their labor, which properly belongs to them. It distorts economic activity by reducing the incentive to save and invest, which are vital for growth. And unlike most taxes, enforcing an income tax involves a significant breach of privacy to collect all the relevant financial information. So we know that income tax can and should be eliminated, but the point of this committee is to explore how. It's going to be tempting to say that you should just use sales tax or property tax to make up the difference, but I'm encouraging you to focus on reducing the budget and exploring alternative revenue sources instead. Something like how the fuel tax is the main source of revenue for transportation, only I would say a direct user fee for services like how we do for most things in life is even better. The main effort in this is going to be how to cut spending. The tendency is to look only at the seen benefits of government programs when talking about cuts, but it's vital to also look at the unseen costs of the program. Remember, when you take money out of private hands and have the state spend it instead, what you are doing is diverting resources away from people's demonstrated preferences. The government has no way to know how to rationally allocate resources, which is why centrally planned economies fail. This process won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. If you don't mind, afterwards, I'd just like to get your name on our sign-in sheet for our records later on.
Certainly.
So thank you for being here and appreciate your comments.
Yep.
You want to say your name again?
Yeah, I'm Brian Allen.
Brian. And I won't have you spell it now. We'll just get it afterwards if that's okay with you, just for our records.
Brian with an I, Allen with an E.
Good deal. That concludes the speakers who've signed up and those who've come from the audience. If there's anyone else, we'll give one final call. Thank you all for being here. We will set the next meeting very soon. I imagine that it will be at a different location so we can get more feedback from those who are obviously potentially would benefit, or as Senator Orrock thinks, would potentially be harmed across the state. So thank y'all for being here today. Who might be harmed, those who may be harmed.